Welcome back to Diseases of History, and for February we're talking cholera. So, cholera is an interesting case because while tuberculosis gets romanticized in popular culture as this disease of the wealthy, although it did also affect the poor, like Lord Byron once said, I should like, I think, to die of consumption, because then the women would all say, see that poor Byron, how interesting he looks in dying. And Charlotte Bronte, who wrote Jane Eyre, said, consumption, I am aware, is a flattering malady. And, honestly, there may even be some links between tuberculosis and vampire mythology. In contrast, cholera carries the stigma because it's associated with mainly the poor and has some really horrifying symptoms. So, ain't nobody saying any of that about cholera. And often when it is depicted, it's this sort of looming threat in the background that we don't necessarily face up to. So, in Gabriel Garcia Marquez's Love in the Time of Cholera, Dr. Juvenal Urbino is devoted to modernity, and with it, that brings the eradication of cholera and the promotion of public works. So cholera as a disease is contrasted against Urbano's idealism. There's also sort of a pun on the Spanish word for passion, so it's exploring the relationship between love and passion, which Urbino lacks, but his rival Florentino has in abundance. Anyway, not spoiling a fantastic 40-year-old book, cholera has been a looming threat in human history for some time that sort of goes overlooked. In fact, there's been 7 cholera pandemics in the last 200 years and an ongoing one since 1961. So cholera is caused by this bacterium, Vibrio cholerae. The classic symptom is profuse watery diarrhea, which can lead to severe dehydration and electrolyte imbalances within hours. It's spread mostly via contaminated water and affects an estimated 2.8 million people worldwide. Now, this may be an underestimate because it primarily occurs in underserved areas and it's pretty heavily stigmatized, so people don't want it to affect tourism numbers. The word cholera comes from the Greek cholera, which means bile. Now, the first references to cholera appear in 1642 in the works of Dutch physician Jacob de Bont in De Medicina Indorum. Although this may not be Vibrio cholera, cholera historically referred to any disease that produced yellow bile diarrhea. However, the first recorded pandemic began near Calcutta in 1817. So this mainly affected people throughout Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Eastern Africa, and Europe, primarily being spread by the British Navy. A second one went from Northern Africa, Europe, and North America in 1826. Now, the French doctors associated this disease with poverty, but they didn't really understand how it was spread. In the United States, it really fueled anti-Irish immigrant sentiments, with Irish immigrants being blamed for introducing the disease. A third outbreak hit Europe and North America in 1846. It compounded the Great Famine in Ireland in 1847. It also took the life of former U.S. President James K. Polk. But this was the pandemic that brought us our first real understanding of the disease via Dr. John Snow in 1854. Turns out he actually did know some things. Snow was born in York, England. He was the son of a laborer in a local coal yard, and his neighborhood growing up was one of the poorest. The streets were often contaminated by sewage runoff from the nearby river Ouse, but young Snow showed a lot of promise for mathematics. At the age of 14, he was given a medical apprenticeship near Newcastle-on-Tyne, and in 1832, as an apprentice, he encountered his first cholera epidemic in the mining village of Killingsworth. Throughout the 1830s, he began researching cholera alongside Thomas Michael Greenhow. He was admitted to the Royal College of Surgeons in 1838 and earned his MD in 1844. He then became a founding member of the Epidemiological Society of London in 1850, which was formed in response to an 1849 cholera outbreak, this being part of the larger outbreak of 1846. Now, at this time, miasma theory was still the prominent theory of disease transmission. Essentially, we thought that diseases like cholera or plague were spread by noxious bad air. Some of the roots of germ theory were there. In fact, as early as 56 BCE, Lucretius had stated that diseases had seeds, and De Rerum Natura is one of my favorite books. It is this epic poem that summarizes the state of science in early Rome. It's so cool, and it's beautifully written. Regardless, these ideas were rejected or even ridiculed by some. For example, Ignaz Semmelweis showed that hand-washing reduced maternal mortality after birth, but largely got ignored. So in 1849, John Snow published his theory on the mode of communication of cholera with the results of his studies, and he proposed that it was spread through the fecal-oral route from the lower intestine. Wasn't really well received, though. Now, in 1854, there was a large outbreak of cholera along Broad Street in Soho, London. And John Snow, along with local Reverend Henry Whitehead, went out to investigate the pattern of this disease. Snow put together a dot map to isolate the source of the disease, and he traced it down to a local well pump. He then persuaded the local council to disable the well pump and remove its handle, which helped to reduce the spread of the disease. It was later discovered that the well had been dug just 3 feet from a nearby cesspit, which was leaking into the well. He even found the initial case, which was a baby with cholera whose diaper had been disposed in the cesspit. Regardless, the public rejected Snow's theory. They found the fecal-oral route of transmission to be unpalatable. In his second and much enlarged edition of On the Mode of Communication of Cholera, Snow theorized that cholera was caused by cells smaller than the human epithelium, and he recommended boiling and filtering water for drinking. Now, it wouldn't be until 1884 that Robert Koch identified the bacteria, Vibrio cholerae, as the agent, thus vindicating Snow, but his recommendation to boil and filter the water is still in use today.